You've probably read the headlines about Elon Musk, rocket launches, electric cars, the new AI projects. But have you ever thought about the real story behind the headlines? The side of Elon Musk you never see. The man behind the name? Yeah, I'm about to share something with you that's a bit different from the usual tech news. It was a few months ago when I found myself next to Elon, just us on a quiet road trip. Elon and I had known each other for years, but that day, well, that day felt different. He just stepped away from his role in Trump's cabinet, and, to be honest, he seemed like he was in a pretty heavy place mentally. You'd think a guy like him would always be in control, always on top of everything. But when you're that successful, you carry a lot of weight on your shoulders, sometimes more than people realize. Now, this story isn't about Mars or rockets. It's about his son. Elon had his son with him that day, his little boy, who'd recently been caught up in some public stories. You might have heard about how people started questioning the behavior of Elon's son, and there were whispers about his bad character. Yeah, it was a buzz in the news, and not in a way you'd expect. People were quick to judge, to speculate, because his son wasn't some perfect little angel. But here's the thing, people really don't get it. We were driving, and I noticed Elon was unusually quiet, his eyes occasionally flicking to the back seat where his son was sitting, playing with something that I could barely make out. After a while, the silence between us grew. It was the kind of silence that feels a bit too heavy to ignore. Finally, Elon spoke, but it wasn't about business or tech. It was about his son. "You ever wonder what it's like to be judged before you even know who you are?" he asked me. I wasn't sure what he meant at first. But then I realized. His son was growing up in a world where every little mistake or misstep could be magnified. And with Elon being the famous figure he is, his child's every action was under a microscope. People didn't care if he was a kid having a bad day. They only saw the headlines. I watched as Elon turned to his son and asked him in that calm, fatherly way, "What's on your mind?" The kid, maybe around 8 years old at the time, just looked out the window for a moment. He seemed a little lost in thought. Then he blurted out, "Why do people always talk about me like I'm the bad one?" His voice wasn't angry, just confused. Elon's face softened. I could tell he was deeply affected by his son's words. This wasn't the CEO of SpaceX. This was just a dad trying to understand his child's pain. And I knew right then this wasn't just about public perception. This was about a father trying to protect his son from the harsh realities of the world. The thing that stood out most to me was how much Elon tried to make sure his son didn't feel the weight of the world. He wasn't defending his son from what others were saying. He was trying to help him understand that the world isn't fair. And no matter how famous or successful you are, life will throw judgment at you when you least expect it. As we continued driving, I could see Elon starting to explain, "It's not about being perfect, son. It's about being true to who you are, even when the world doesn't understand you." The kid looked up at him, still unsure, but it was clear Elon was doing his best to guide him through this. It wasn't some tech talk or business advice, just raw, fatherly wisdom. For a brief moment, I saw a different side of Elon. He wasn't the billionaire genius who could land rockets or create the future of cars. He was just a man who wanted to make sure his son understood that the world doesn't define who you are. You define it. And then, as if the moment passed, Elon turned back to the road, and the conversation shifted. But I couldn't shake the feeling that what I'd just witnessed was something real, something beyond the public persona of Elon Musk. I realized then that all the headlines, the stories, the rumors, it didn't matter. What mattered was how he showed up for his son. So yeah, people talk about his son's bad character, but trust me, there's a lot more to the story. It's easy to judge a child, especially when their father is the face of every newspaper and news feed. But sometimes what these kids need most is just to be heard, to be understood, and to be loved by their parents. And from what I saw that day, Elon Musk was doing just that, being the dad his son needed. After that brief moment in the car, where I saw a glimpse of Elon Musk as a father just trying to do his best, things started to make sense. The situation with his son wasn't just a simple family issue. It was magnified like everything in Elon's life tends to be. The news had been buzzing about his son, and it wasn't just the usual tech headlines or SpaceX updates. The talk was about his son's behavior, and some critics were quick to label him as having a bad character. But here's the thing. When you're the child of one of the most famous figures in the world, life is never simple. Everything is public. Every tantrum, every laugh, every decision is observed through a microscope, and people are quick to jump to conclusions. I'm sure you've seen the headlines. The ones that question how Elon Musk's son is being raised, or the ones that throw accusations about his behavior being influenced by his father's success. What these articles often miss is the reality of being a child in such an environment. It's not easy. It's not like being a kid at a local school where you have a private life outside of the public eye. In Elon's case, his child is thrust into a world where cameras and opinions are everywhere, even when he's just trying to grow up like any other child. Elon, being the public figure he is, knows that people are watching every move his family makes. But I saw something different in him that day we were driving. It wasn't about defending his son in front of the public or addressing the media's narrative. Elon was focused on his son, on his well-being, on how to guide him through the noise. There was no talk about PR or managing public perception. There was just a father trying to figure out the best way to raise his child while the world had its own opinions. It's a tough position, right? When you're constantly under public scrutiny, you don't get the luxury of making mistakes privately. Every misstep becomes a headline. Elon Musk's son, like all children, will have moments where they act out, where they try to test boundaries, where they struggle with emotions. But when you're in the public eye, those moments don't just pass unnoticed. The world gets a front row seat, and it doesn't take long before people start speculating about your parenting or the child's bad character. But the truth is, no one has the full picture. No one knows what's going on behind closed doors. All the public can do is speculate, judge, and offer opinions based on a few brief moments of footage or a tweet. That's why it's important to remember that parenting, especially when you're someone as famous as Elon Musk, isn't something anyone can truly understand without walking in those shoes. And from what I saw that day, Elon was doing what any responsible parent would do. He was trying to teach his son the value of resilience, understanding, and most importantly, being true to yourself even when the world tries to write your story for you. I remember one of the more recent news articles that painted a picture of Elon Musk as struggling to connect with his son. But here's the catch. Those who looked a little deeper would know that Elon's relationship with his children is anything but distant. In fact, there have been many instances where Elon has expressed his desire to be more involved with his kids. He's even shared on Twitter how important it is for him to be around for family moments, despite his hectic work schedule. The truth is, he's not just a billionaire businessman. He's a father who's actively trying to be present in his son's life, in whatever way he can. The scrutiny surrounding his son's behavior is tough, but it's part of the reality of being in the Musk family. The spotlight is always on them, and that pressure is something that anyone can find difficult to handle. Yet, Elon has always been vocal about his own struggles with public perception, admitting that he doesn't always feel like he gets the benefit of the doubt. That's a tough place to be, especially when you're trying to balance being a father with being a globally recognized figure. While some headlines focus on the so-called bad behavior, those who know Elon understand that he's always working to do better for himself, for his family, and for the future. His focus on innovation and pushing boundaries doesn't stop at his work. It extends to how he's trying to improve as a parent, as a partner, and as a person. People forget that there's more to Elon Musk than just Tesla and SpaceX. He's human too. He makes mistakes. He has challenges. And like any father, he has moments where he needs to adjust and grow, especially when it comes to raising his children in a world full of expectations. Despite what the media says about his son's bad character, it's important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Parenting in the public eye is a challenge that few can comprehend. And when it comes to Elon Musk, one thing is clear. He's doing his best to navigate that journey with his son, just like any parent would. All right, I have to admit, what I'm about to tell you next is something I never expected to see. When I think of Elon Musk, I think of SpaceX rockets, electric cars, and tweets that send the whole world into a frenzy. But what happened next? This was not the usual Musk drama. This was a real, raw moment between father and son, and it shook me to my core. So here we were, cruising through the streets of California after we'd had a deep conversation about everything from business to the future of tech. But something in Elon's demeanor changed when his son, the one at the center of all those bad character headlines, started acting up. It wasn't anything crazy, but the moment stood out because of how Elon handled it. This wasn't about being a billionaire or a tech genius. It was about being present. I noticed it first when his son tossed a toy onto the floor of the car. It was a simple thing. Kids act up all the time, but it caught my attention because Elon didn't react like most parents would. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't immediately lecture his kid. Instead, he stopped the car. He pulled over onto the side of the road in a quiet spot, his eyes softening as he turned to his son. And here's the crazy part. Elon didn't snap. He didn't even seem frustrated. Instead, he just listened. "Buddy, what's going on?" Elon asked, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You're upset about something. Tell me what it is." This is where things took a surprising turn. Most parents might have rushed to fix the behavior, but Elon was more focused on why his son was upset. For a second, it was like all the pressures of being the richest man in the world didn't matter. It wasn't about the headlines or what the public thought of his son. It was about getting to the heart of the issue. And that's when his son opened up. The words that came out of his mouth were simple, but they hit hard. "People say I'm bad, that I'm not good like you. But I'm just me." There was this vulnerability in his voice, something that caught me off guard because, let's face it, when you're the child of someone like Elon Musk, you're always in the spotlight. And let's be real, people love to judge, especially when you're the kid of a billionaire. It's easy to paint kids with the same broad brush, assuming they'll be perfect or follow in their parents' footsteps. But that's not reality. Elon sat there for a second, absorbing his son's words. And in that moment, it was clear that Elon wasn't just trying to solve a behavioral problem. He was trying to understand what was behind the behavior. He wasn't about to let his kid feel like a disappointment just because the world had already made up its mind about him. Elon, in his usual way, responded with something unexpected. "Being you is more than enough. You don't need to be like anyone else. You don't need to live up to anyone's expectations. Just be yourself, and the world will catch up." It was one of those rare moments where you could see a father not just giving advice, but actively trying to protect his kid from the harshness of public perception. And it wasn't about shutting people out. It was about teaching his son how to navigate that world. The news? Yeah, people had already judged his son based on a few moments of bad behavior. Some even went so far as to say that this was a reflection of how Elon was raising him. But here's the thing, being a parent in the public eye is an impossible task. Everyone has an opinion on how you should raise your kid, how you should act, what you should say. And no matter what, you're going to mess up sometimes, just like anyone else. But what I witnessed that day with Elon was something that didn't get enough attention in the media. Elon wasn't just responding to his son's bad behavior. He was teaching him how to handle criticism, how to navigate judgment, and how to grow through it. It's easy to forget that at the end of the day, Elon Musk is still just a father trying to raise his kids in a world that's always watching. And in a moment when the world was calling his son's character into question, Elon reminded him of something incredibly important. You don't have to fit anyone's mold to be enough. So, after that conversation, I wasn't expecting what happened next. We drove for a little while longer, and as we hit a stretch of road with a view of the ocean, Elon seemed to get lost in his thoughts. He wasn't thinking about his next big project, his next big investment, or anything tech-related. No, he was focused on his son, how to protect him, how to help him grow up strong in a world full of expectations. It was in that moment that I realized something. Elon Musk, for all his success, wasn't invincible. He faced the same challenges every parent faces. The fears about whether you're doing enough for your kids, whether they'll turn out okay in the end, and how to shield them from the harsh realities of the world. But at the same time, Elon knew his son was more than capable of handling it all, if only the world would give him the space to do so. And here's the kicker. After everything, after the news stories and the rumors, after all the bad character talk, Elon made one thing clear. He was going to stand by his son. He wasn't going to let the world's judgment affect his relationship with his child. He was going to teach him how to rise above it. The rest of the drive was pretty quiet, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. Elon had a lot of challenges to face as a father, as a businessman, and as a public figure. But at the end of the day, what mattered most was the kind of example he set for his kids, and the love and guidance he provided them. The car rolled smoothly down the winding road, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon. casting long shadows over the landscape. But for a moment, Elon Musk wasn't the tech mogul we all know. He wasn't SpaceX's mastermind or Tesla's billionaire CEO. He was just a dad trying to navigate something that felt much harder than launching rockets, raising his kids in a world that was constantly watching. I'd been a close observer of Elon's life for a long time, but what I saw that evening, in the calm of the car, gave me a new perspective. We'd just had the conversation with his son, and I could see that the weight of it all wasn't lost on him. The pressures of being a parent, while constantly under the microscope, were hard to ignore. What's funny, though, is that for all the stories about Elon's bad parenting and the rumors about his son, there's something that the world doesn't seem to get. This isn't just about Elon Musk, the billionaire innovator who can change the world. This is about a father who is trying to make sure his kids grow up grounded in a world that expects perfection. The media had made it easy to cast judgment on Elon's son. Reports about his behavior seemed to fly off the shelves, each headline more salacious than the last. And sure, his son had his moments, like any child would, but it wasn't those moments that should define him. What really mattered was how Elon was responding to it. In those quiet moments in the car, I watched as Elon took it all in. He didn't throw his son under the bus, didn't blame him for anything. Instead, he asked the questions that mattered. How are you feeling? Why does this bother you? What can I do to help you understand this? It was a level of patience I hadn't expected, especially from someone whose life was as hectic and fast-paced as Elon's. But it made sense when I thought about it. In a world where the public constantly tries to shape you, to put you in boxes, it's easy to forget that there's more to someone than their worst moments. Elon understood that better than anyone. I couldn't help but think of the articles that had been circling around, some implying that Elon's son was somehow bad or troubled. But what people don't realize is that bad behavior is often just a reflection of something deeper, something that needs understanding, not judgment. And that's exactly what Elon was giving his son. Understanding. I'm not saying Elon is perfect. Like anyone, he has his flaws. But he's trying. And I think that's the part of the story that gets lost in all the noise. We're so quick to judge, to point fingers, to paint someone as a villain or a hero based on a few moments of their lives. But behind every headline is a family struggling with the same things that any other family faces. And the way Elon was handling the situation with his son, that was the biggest lesson he taught me that day. It wasn't about being perfect or always having the right answers. It was about being there, about showing up for your kids when the world is watching and when the world isn't. As we neared the end of the drive, I could see Elon's son had calmed down. He was no longer restless or upset, but rather, he was looking out the window, deep in thought. Elon glanced at him and smiled. It wasn't a smile for the cameras or for anyone else. It was a genuine, fatherly smile that only a parent could understand. And it was then that I realized the depth of Elon's commitment to his children. The drive had come to an end, but the conversation would linger in my mind for a long time. I've seen Elon Musk at his most innovative, his most driven, and his most brilliant. But that night, I saw him at his most human. He wasn't a billionaire mogul. He wasn't the face of Tesla or SpaceX. He was just a dad trying to do what's best for his kids in a world that's quick to judge and slow to understand. So, when the next headline comes out, the next story about his son's behavior, or the next round of judgmental comments, I hope people remember this. Elon Musk is trying, just like the rest of us. Parenting isn't easy, especially when the world is watching. But what matters most is that he's showing up. He's not running from the challenge. And at the end of the day, I think that's what makes him not just a great innovator, but a great father too.